and alike.
Hosted by four-time Emmy-nominated producer
Frank Pace and retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Viet Nam vet, Billy O'Connor.
Today's guests: retired president of Warner Brothers Film, Steve Papazian.
My brother Frankie, how you doing, pal?
You look surprised to hear me talk.
What's a guy like you doing in a nice place like this? What's the story?
You're so funny. Our guest today is the retired president of Warner Brothers Physical Production, Steve Papazian, who worked there for 47, almost 50 years. He worked his way up from the mailroom. But we'll get to Steve in a moment. What's your take on Will Smith?
My take on the Oscar fiasco? The assault? I mean, I guess you'd call it.
Well, you were a stand-up comic. Of sorts.
Yeah, as a stand-up comic, I mean, I thought it was appalling. I mean, here's a guy who's a professional. I mean, Chris Rock was doing his job. He might have been an off-color joke, a bad joke, but as a comic, I think the worst thing he could have did was not laugh, Will Smith, and look at him and just say, like, poor taste or something like that. Because as a comic, I can tell you, when you tell a joke and it bombs, it hurts a lot more than somebody smacking you in the face. Believe me, it hurts a lot more than somebody smacking you in the face. So I thought it was selfish.
I thought Will Smith was playing to the crowd.
He didn't think he really lost it.
No, I think he thought it was funny, and then he looked at his wife. His wife gave him a stink face, and he was playing to his wife. So he got up and...
Well, he has to sleep with a Frank. You don't, so I mean...
How do you know?
I just assumed you were.
Well, I tell you, one guy who'll have a take on it is the retired president of Warner Brothers Physical Production, who's been to a few Academy Awards in his time, Steve Papazian. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, well, thank you, guys.
Real pleasure to have you here. Really, really a pleasure. Thanks.
So, Steve, what was your take on the Academy
Awards? Well, it's difficult for me. Obviously, the whole thing was inappropriate, in my opinion, and tragic. I think Chris Rock was insensitive to that was unscripted. It was Chris Rock, and he made a joke of something that shouldn't have been funny, given her medical condition. And I somewhat agree with Frank that at first he took it lightly, and then he looked at his wife, and he got the look, and we all get the look. If you've been married,
we know what the look is.
We get the look, and the look means, oh shit, what did I do? Anyway, Will reacted inappropriately. Obviously, there's more to it that maybe we'll never know, but he lost control. And it's not like Will Smith to lose control. He's a delightful person. He's an elegant person. He is a friendly, overly friendly person. On set, away from set. I've golfed with Will. At one time, he had a deal at Universal. Had offices directly across the river from Lakeside Golf Club, for where I'm a member, in Toluca Lake. And Will said, God, I would love to be a member of Lakeside. And how does it work? And I said, well, you need sponsors and you need to come in. And so I volunteered to sponsor him. And he came over quite a few times. And in the midst of all of that, I think that they chose to raise their children away from the limelight at the time and moved all the way out to beyond Calabasas. I couldn't tell you exactly where, but either up Canaan Road or way out by Malibu in the hills, but not on the beach. And it just, I think, to spend more time with his family, he chose to join North Ranch Golf Club. So he passed on that, and I didn't do a lot of films with Will, but we did do I Am Legend, which is a pretty big film in New York, and it took a lot of physicality and a lot of Will Smith. If you saw the movie, the cast is practically nil, but Will Smith, and boy did he carry that movie. So I have absolutely nothing but good things to say about Will, and I just think There's more to it. He lost control. What should have happened was all of that should have happened either backstage or at another time, and it would have been more appropriate if he wanted to pound his head in later, but it wasn't right to be doing it at that time.
Yeah, that shows you the power of the stink eye.
Well, we've had a number of guests that knew Will Smith, and they all talk about his generosity. The most
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
So
it seemed like that.
it just something clicked, and thank God it hasn't clicked yet in me. It could have, but it didn't. And it's unfortunate. It's a terrible situation. I hated to see it. It kind of, for me, my reaction was I'm heartbroken that this happened.
Yeah.
Now, in your 50 years at Warner, how many Academy Awards have you attended? Did you attend, was it like the Patty's Day Parade for me as a fireman? You know what, miss him? Did you go to every one?
No, it's an arduous journey, the Academy Awards. You better be prepared for a very long day and a very long night. Please, I'm not lessening it. It's still delightful. I attended my first Academy Award when I was very young. I had never made a movie. I was, at that time, I got my first vice presidency at the Burbank Studios, which was we can go into that in my history, but it was a division of Warner Brothers and Columbia Pictures who had decided back in at the turn of that decade in 70 to amalgamate the studios, Columbia Pictures and Warner Brothers, and Columbia moved from Hollywood to the Warner Brothers lot. And I became a part of the company, the holding company or the facility company, if you will, that serviced Columbia and Warner Brothers. And when I kind of reached a higher rank, they as being a studio got so many Academy invitations, and so I got to go to my first one. And
what year was that?
It was great. It was your first one
It's gotta
is
be
like
amazing.
takes your breath away. And it was a cold night, almost a drizzly night. And my date at the time, I was not married, and we wanted to get her an outfit. Neither one of us had a ton of money. And so we took her to wardrobe, and I'm running a studio, so I took her to wardrobe, and the ladies in wardrobe said, "Wow, she was had a cute figure," and they said, got her a dress and everything, and they said, one of them said, "I have a really good idea," and she went into the vault, which was a cold room, and came out with a unbelievably beautiful, almost floor-length mink coat that was only once worn by Natalie Wood. And she said, "You're about the only person that could wear this coat and make it look right, because nobody had a figure like Natalie Wood. Not even you, but you're close." And she said Natalie Wood had like a 22-inch waist. And she put on that mink coat, and wow, it was crazy. So she wore the mink coat. Anyway, we came out of the Academy Awards, and you're waiting for your cars, right? Your limos, and it's kind of drizzly. There's some umbrellas being held up, and by nice attendants, because you don't drag your umbrella into the Oscar. And Elizabeth Taylor was standing there with a very nice umbrella and a very nice young man holding her umbrella. And we came out, and she kind of looked at Renee, who was my date, and said, "Oh, honey, come and stand next to me. You don't want to get that coat wet." And Elizabeth Taylor, right? And so she went, and she's like standing next to Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor was not terribly tall. They were pretty close to about the same size. And these two are just yakking away. And this young girl is like, oh my God, I'm standing here talking to Elizabeth Taylor. But that was my first Academy Award. It was probably in the early 70s, and that was back then. And yeah, it's always something.
That was a hell of a date for her.
Yeah, it was a
Elizabeth
great
Taylor,
day for
Academy
her.
Awards.
And, Charlene, my wife, and I went to the Oscars last time, probably 6 years ago, something like that. And it's always fun. And the parties are always fun. And generally, Warner Brothers has an after party. You're invited to a few, but Warner Brothers has one, and we generally would go to Warner Brothers. But what was the most fun, it was the Warner Brothers pre-Oscar celebration, where every single nominee, from a head of visual effects to a cinematographer to a film editor to a costume designer, were invited along with the stars. And whether that was better than going to the Oscars, because for us, it's intimate. It used to be held at the Bel Air Hotel. They put up a tent on the lawn, and it was a top first class.
No wonder you were married at the Bel Air Hotel. You officially got exposed to it.
Well, no, I was exposed to it before that. This is through the years of my movie side of things. We used to always, every year, be able to attend quote an Oscar party, but it was. And it was great, and all the actors came, and all the nominees came. They'd come from wherever they lived in the world.
Now, were these just the nominees from Warner Brothers, or all the
just
nominees?
From Warner Brothers,
from
all of our nominees,
right.
And it's pretty exciting to win Best Picture award, and that is generally after that you get a big celebration. And when Clint won it for $1 Million Baby, it was a surprise, but it was just wonderful. And then The Departed won Best Picture. And pictures under my tutelage, you feel really good. You get kind of a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah. Oh, I guess.
With the little piece that I may have of the film, you still get a sense.
Let me ask you that question, because I'm a layman, obviously. I know nothing about movies, about just being a fan, But we've had a few directors, and directors say, well, they're storytellers, basically. And I guess the actors would be the vehicles to tell the story. If I was to make a real simplistic thing, are you the guy that picks the stories? Is that what you are, as the worldwide head of it?
No. I don't pick the stories. A film company is organized essentially like most any company. So I'll compare it to an auto industry. The auto industry has the head guy, the CEO, who has a sordid background but has to know pretty much everything about that industry.
Ground up.
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy. He's the boss. So you have a boss. And so I had quite a few chief executive officers and a number of corporations that owned my company, our company. And so you have to deal with many individuals and many corporations who some had different ideologies. And most recently at Warner Brothers, that was, thank God, just past my time, was AT&T, who came into a company who had no idea what they bought. And thus, I don't have to say it, they just spun it off for half of what they paid for it. That's a grievous error. So you have a CEO, and then you have divisions. So, you have to remember the original division was only one division, and that was a movie business. That was Jack Warner, or the Warner Brothers business. There were no ancillary companies. There was no music company. There was no television company. There was no record company. There was no anything. They lived and died by their movies. They either made money, they didn't make money, and if they didn't make money, there is no Warner Brothers. Sell the property for real estate, and bye bye, I'm out of business. So that's pretty tough business. You got to make a movie, and people got to come see it. So you have divisions, and we had numerous divisions ultimately when I retired. But let's just say it's a movie company. In the movie company, you have an individual who, at least we did, which was a layer, a COO, the head of the movie side of things. So I'm going to call that person Alan Horn. Alan Horn was there for a good tenure of my overall 25 years in the movie side, and maybe even 12 years. And Alan Horn sat at the top, and he's essentially a creative individual, right? A creative being. He knows story, he knows script, he knows talent. But he has a business acumen.
Mm-hmm.
Under Alan is the president of creative. The president of creative is the individual who has a team that are developing scripts. They're working with people who may bring them a magazine article, and they go, wow, this would make a great movie. So I'm going to hire, who should we hire as a writer to adapt this article into a movie? Well, I like this one, I like that one, let's give it to Frank. And so Frank will take a pass at it, and they go, well, Frank, that's a great start. Now we're going to move over,
Give it to someone else.
to Derek. And Derek takes it, and he does what he does to it. And they're the ones developing the property. In the meantime, it's gotten the attention of Alan Horn. And I'm going to say there were a number of creative heads. So I'll just go to one, and that was Jeff Robinoff, and I worked with him probably the most. And so Jeff had very good taste, but he did rely on his creative executives to bring him the material, and he was the one standing at the top of the pyramid making creative decisions. And you get a script and you go, wow, this is really great, let's get a director. And so this creative department are the ones that go out, and before we got on the air here, we laughed at about Frank's comment that the best entry-level job in Hollywood is a director, because we got a number of first-time directors, and some, wow, this really talented, and the other ones were like, wow, where did you find this person? So they all collaborate, and they bring on a director. Occasionally, they would ask me an opinion, and I would give an opinion. Had I worked with them before, if I worked with them before, but had I not worked with them before, I would do my homework, and I would talk to my colleagues around the industry who may have worked with them before, and had my own opinions and their opinions, and we'd form a decision. And then we get the director, and then once you get a director, I come into it and work with the director and a producer. And a producer can be many things. A producer can be hired, as we need an adult on the set. We need an adult as part of this organization. We need an adult as a decision maker. So we're going to hire Derek to produce it. Or the producer may be the individual who brought the magazine article in the first place. And as part of the deal to acquire the magazine article, or they may have already acquired it or optioned it. So they become a producer. Some of them never produced anything in their life, but some of them, it's their profession, and they're a good producer or an experienced producer. So you have a producer. I would meet with the producer and the director, and we'd talk about, now this is my job. How are we going to make the movie? What do you think about the movie? Maybe it hadn't even been cast. Possibly I had gotten a number of these scripts as the process went along, so I had my own opinions on how I would make the movie. And we would collaborate and talk about where to make the movie, and I always had to have an eye on the prize, which is the most responsible fiduciary way to make the movie, as well as creative. So I always felt that I had to have a sense of creativity. However, I had to have business acumen. And so my division, which I had a layer of help, you can't do this all by yourself. We were doing at one time 30 films a year. And in the 30 films a year, I always laughed because we probably read 100 different concepts to boil it down to 30 pictures a year. And toward the end of my career, our annual budget was well over $1 billion to make 25 films. So, it exponentially, you were always reading, always working, always trying to figure out movies. So I had to figure them out with a producer, the director, and the creative person. One of the creative executives, let's say it's Jesse Ehrman or Courtney Belendi, and I would collaborate with them. But ultimately, Jeff Robinoff and I were both presidents, and so we would have quite a bit of collaboration.
You'd make the ultimate decision on where it was shot.
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate decision was mine. It had to be done in tandem with the creative people, because you can't put a square peg in a round hole. So that's where basically my creative instincts came in. And I remember Ben Affleck, if you're listening to this, he and I had a bit of a tiff because I sent him around to a number of locations to look for the sequence in Argo, which was yet again another best film, and my hat's off to Ben, and Ben made the right decision. But he wanted to go to Istanbul for a big portion of a sequence where they go out into the streets, they go through the bazaar, they're trying to get out, and they go through that grand bazaar, and it's very colorful and really beautiful. And he wanted to go to Istanbul, and I said, "Well, Ben, you got to look at other places." And I don't want to look at other places. Hey, we got to go look at other places. I'd like you to go to Casablanca. I'd like you to go to maybe even Sofia, Bulgaria. They have similar. I'd been around. I did a film in Bulgaria. I had done a number in Morocco, and Ben had never been. And I don't want to go to those places. I said, Ben, you got to go look at them, because they're probably half the price of Istanbul. There's not great crew base in Turkey. Morocco is a professional crew base. They make film after film after film in Morocco. I can basically take your department heads and get everybody else there. Bulgaria is like, how do I explain it? If you spend $1 here, you spend 12 cents in Bulgaria. Anyway, he went. We ended up in Istanbul, which was creatively absolutely the right decision. And I'm not sure he ever forgave me for sending him to Bulgaria. I don't think he minded Casablanca, but he got to Bulgaria and went, "What am I doing here?" Right? So even though you fly him private. That's not that big a deal. It's just time consumption. So he got a little testy. But in the end, it all worked out for the best. And so that was my job. And my job is to take the movie with my division and finish the movie. And I mean finish it from top to bottom. Day one,
Starting
roll
with getting it
camera.
made.
Pardon me?
Starting with getting it made.
Yes, starting with getting a green light. And the green light process
Not
is...
finish it from a post-production standpoint, but you mean
Yeah,
finish it.
yeah, you have to finish it.
So let me ask you, you have a very special relationship with Clint Eastwood. How did that start? And could you expand on it?
Well, Clint is a special individual. Clint earned, boy, did he earn the right to pick and choose essentially the films that Clint wants to make. So it could be Clint Eastwood Studios at that time. So Clint would read scripts. He had a couple of folks that were just constantly devouring concepts and properties, and obviously everybody wants to submit their picture to Clint Eastwood.
Sure.
Why wouldn't they? And Clint would pick and choose the ones that he truly wanted to make. And he had a very good relationship for years with Bob Daly and Terry Semel, who co-CEO'd Warner Brothers for over almost 2 decades. And Clint would say, I want to make this movie. Great. Who do you want to put in it? And let's go. And so I still had a job to do, to meet with Clint and say, Clint, what do you think? What are you thinking about this? And he was got to know me. I'd kind of gotten to know him a little bit when I was doing television, because my office ironically backed up to Malpaso, and we'd see each other in the morning and start talking. And we ended up going up to his golf course, and even when I was doing television. So even though we didn't work together, we kind of got to know each other, and saw him up at Tehama, and we played golf a couple of times. But then when I got the movie side of the job, we really worked closely together. And so as an example, I'll take a couple of films, but one of the films was Gran Torino, which still is one of my proudest films, one of the film that I loved as an individual. And it was, I felt, the absolute perfect Clint Eastwood movie. And we met, and Clint said, I did my homework. The two largest Hmong communities, and Hmongs were the Asian family that was part of the scenario, his next door neighbors. And the Hmongs are an interesting race of people. They're not really Chinese. They're kind of Mongols, and they're nomadic, and so they were pretty much persecuted. And so many of the Hmongs seeked asylum in the U.S. like other nationalities that were oppressed, and they brought them over and they put them into 2 various communities. And Clint said, I did my homework, and the 2 biggest Hmong communities are Fresno, California, and just outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I really don't want to go to Fresno. Nobody wants to go to Fresno. Sorry, Fresno. And so maybe we should look at Minnesota. And I had just come back from a number of meetings with the legislative group of Michigan, and we had met about how can we help Detroit. Detroit was on its ear.
Devastated.
This was devastated. It didn't look like it was part of this country. Buildings were abandoned. Buildings were ruined. The auto industry was on its ear. And met with them, and we talked about incentives, and they came up with an unbelievable incentive. And so, while I won't talk dollars, I never talked in my life Warner Brothers dollars. That was always in confidence, but they came up with an unbelievable incentive. So I said to Clint, "Have you ever been to Michigan?" He said, "I think so. I'm not sure." I said, "Is it Michigan?" I said, "Yeah, Detroit." I said, "I just got back, Clint, and not only do they need help, but they're offering a ton of money, and they'll give me an incentive on your salary." My salary? I said, "Yeah, they'll give me a rebate on Clint Eastwood's salary. Your corporation will have to pay some taxes to Michigan, but then those taxes to Michigan are credited against your California taxes, which is your residence, and it's a lot cheaper than California. So it doesn't hurt anybody. It behooves us, and for the money that they're going to give us, trust me, you can take every Hmong from Fresno and put them in your movie." He said, "There are thousands of them, every Hmong." That's how good a deal it is. So he looked at Rob, who was his producer at the time, and he said, "I think we should go look at Michigan." So they went to Michigan, and they went to Highland Park, Michigan, which is a suburb of Michigan, and which was devastated. It was a Chrysler middle management kind of a neighborhood. Okay, so the houses were not row houses, but they were all what you'd call a middle manager's office. So they were all 2-story, probably on a 50 by 85 or 90 lot, a little bit elevated off the street. They all had a front porch, a detached garage, and a small backyard. And the block that they chose had 2 residents that were still inhabiting houses on that block. The rest of them were all foreclosed and belonged to the bank. They were ill cared for. The one on the end of the corner was burned out because some crackheads had lit it on fire, probably lit themselves on fire too. So it was devastated, and met with the chief of police, and they were a community, suburb community, something like Glendale here that has, or Burbank, that has their own police department and fire department, and they were the one of the few communities that had managed to maintain their own police and fire department. The rest of them had to abandon the concept and go to the county for their assistance because they couldn't afford it. And the police officer was a very large, over-the-top, great-looking black man who was heavy set and rode a big Harley Davidson, had more braids and medals on him than MacArthur.
The kind of cop who shows up when you want to come.
Yeah,
that's the cop you want to show up. That's
and
the guy.
He came in on his Harley, welcomed everybody. God, you got to love you in this community, and but I have to ask one favor. My police officers are on a semi-furlough system, and they work 3 days one week and 4 days the next week and 3 days, and that they're only paid for 3 days. So we've shrunk down. That's how we're hanging on. And I know you all need security, and I would really appreciate if you could do my off-duty policeman as your security. Didn't even ask how much. Done. That was the safest set in the history of the world. We had police officers escort people from their cars to the, whether you needed it or not, it was the safest place in the world at that time. And if you look at the film, at the end of the film, when Clint's character is shot, and he's laying on the lawn, and they're rounding up the nasty gang members, and there's a big, heavy-set black police officer who says, "Get those people back, move them back, get them out of here." That's chief of police. That's the kind of guy Clint is. A pleasure to work with. A wildly true professional, has his eye on the prize from a creative standpoint, and he really has a nose for the dollar.
And he's been a good friend of yours also, because when your daughter got married, Clint came to the wedding.
Yeah, Clint was up in Carmel. We had played golf, and another cute story, playing golf with Clint and Jeff Robinoff, who I love like a brother, and just talked to him this morning, ironically. He has something he wants to do, and he called me. Called me quite a few times while we were playing golf. And Clint said, "Is your daughter getting married this weekend, right?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "What is Jeff calling you for?" I said, well, he's annoying me. He's calling, and it's like, he's attached to me, and it's like I'm not there. And so the phone rang, and Clint grabbed my phone, and he picked it up, and of course it says Jeff Robinoff. Phones do that. He said, "Jeff, we're playing golf. Stop calling." And he hung up. But he said, "Jeff, Jeff, we're playing golf. Stop calling." Hung up.
I got a Clint Eastwood quote here.
So real quick, Jeff called right back. And I picked up the phone real quick, and he goes, "Was that Clint?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Holy shit." "See you Monday." And that was it.
Yeah, well, I have a Clint Eastwood quote about you that Clint had said, and then it's very nice. He said, "Steve's encyclopedic knowledge of global locations and infrastructures have been invaluable to my career." And my question to you is, it strikes me you got a wanderlust about knowing about the world and wanting to see the world. Did that come from your initial foray into Vietnam when you were a kid?
It did. It came from a want, the knowledge want. I was fortunate to do a semester abroad, and then followed that up with a 3-month sojourn around Europe, and also went to places that were off the beaten path back then. So I went to a bit of school in Berlin, Germany, when the wall was up, and so it was a real schlep to get out of Berlin, because you had to drive the corridor to Hanover to go to the west, if you will, but to go east, you're already in the east. So we as Americans only had to secure a visa, and we could go to the Czech Republic, or we could go to East Germany, which wasn't much, but the Czech Republic was beautiful. It was so dour and down, and the dollar, you couldn't spend $5 in a weekend. And to travel through East Germany, you had to buy the equivalent of $2 in East German Deutschmarks that you could not take out of the country. And there was nothing to buy for $2 but petrol. So we'd go empty in the car, fill up with gasoline, and that's how we spend our $2. So
how old were you then, Steve?
I was 20.
20.
20 and turned 21 during that period. After that summer, after school, we traveled around. But I got a chance to go to off places, Budapest and Vienna and Romania and Turkey, and then traveled around through Greece and went through the South and ultimately to Great Britain before I came home. Came home right in the middle of the Watts riots in 1965 after having my 21st birthday in Europe, and came home during the Watts riots. Dad had to. We actually flew to New York and decided that wanted to get home, so we took the Continental Trailways bus. We took the bus down to D.C. to go visit a friend of mine's grandparents, see a little bit of Washington. Then we took the Continental Trailways bus home, and got home right in the middle of the Watts riots. And my dad had to drive downtown to pick me up at the Continental Trailways bus station downtown, because that's the ticket that I'd bought. I didn't even buy a ticket to go to Hollywood. I only went to downtown. And he had to get permission from the National Guard to enter the area because they're burning down LA. And that was my welcome home. And but that's how I got my Wanderlust. It was a pretty special time in my life. Was on my own for the first time in my life, and it was I had worked really hard for it because I had asked my dad, I want to go to school abroad, and he said, well, school I pay for, the rest of it you do yourself. You have to figure out how to finance it. So I worked quite a few number of jobs, and one of those in 1964 I applied for a parking lot attendant job, a valet, if you will, at the Whiskey A Go-Go on Sunset Boulevard, the newly opened Whiskey A Go-Go. It had been opened January of 64, and this was April of 64 when I went and applied for the job and said, I need a summer job. Are you hiring? Because someone told me they're hiring parking lot guys. The place is caught on. It's going crazy, and they're looking for parking lot guys. And so they said, yeah, but we need you right away. So I don't get out of school till, toward the end of May. And they said, well, by then, I don't know if we'll need anybody. And I said, well, I can do it now. So even though I was going to school, I worked from 6 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the morning.
And you probably parked some pretty famous cars, didn't you?
A whole bunch of them. So I know Frank's written a couple of books, and I've read...
Frank and Billy.
And Billy. Billy, excuse me. Frank and Billy. I loved If These Lips Could Talk, and anybody out there who hasn't read it yet should read it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good book, and it's a fair book, and I think Frank's assessments in there are kind and very good. So if I write a book, which I may, it will only be about that period from late April till late August of 1964, which is essentially a summer at the Go-Go.
Could we get a little preview of that book?
Preview would be some of the people I met, the era, the time, the freedom of the 60s, what was happening at the time to be working at the hottest spot in all of Los Angeles. The blocks, the lines were around the block. At the time, Johnny Rivers was the headliner. His primary relief guy was Dobie Gray, who had a big hit. Johnny had a number of big hits. And so the whiskey was the most popular, and second was PJ's. PJ's was down at Crescent Heights in Santa Monica, so it wasn't on the Strip, but it was a hot spot, and Trini Lopez was their headliner, and the Go-Go would play softball against PJ's, and we had a softball league against all these various spots in clubs on Sunset Boulevard, and the best softball game was Grace Glick's Body Shop, which was a topless bar, and their team was pretty hot. But it was fun. It was a good period, and it was great, and I worked for these fascinating men who founded the Whiskey A Go-Go. One of them was a former Chicago policeman. One was a businessman. One was a entrepreneur. Elmer Valentine is the cop. Shelley Davis. It was unbelievable. Guys like Lou Adler used to come to the whiskey, and as a valet, they liked me, and so they wanted me to open in the evening. My job was to, with a couple of guys, hose down the sidewalk, sweep the sidewalk, put the ropes up, stanchions up, put the signs up, put the $1.50 minimum for valet parking, if you can believe $1.50 minimum. But they fed us, and they didn't have a restaurant. They had a fabulous kitchen and a fabulous chef who made a different dinner every night. You either ate it or you didn't eat it. And so if you didn't like meatloaf, don't eat it.
You're out.
But you're out. But he made a great dinner, and everybody who worked at the Go-Go met for dinner, and with the bosses. And it was like a family dinner. The go-go dancers, the girls, the skinny girls who picked at their food, and the bouncers who ate all the leftovers. Everybody ate dinner. And you got to know everybody, and you felt a little bit like a family. However, I was only 20, so I couldn't come in once they opened the doors for business. So you couldn't come in because I wasn't 21. You had to be 21 to go in the go-go.
It's so counterintuitive to me to have you sit here and you're the head of Warner Brothers for 40 or 50 years, and you want to focus on when you were parking cars at the Whiskey and Go.
Yeah, it's just like there's a period of your life where it's magic.
Yeah,
and I, even though I worked my tail off, I probably weighed 125 pounds. Our white jeans were so tight it was embarrassing because people would stuff money in our pants because it was cool to tip the go-go guys extra money, and it was embarrassing because you had these bulges in your pocket, and it was dollars, and it was dollar after dollar, and guys like McQueen would tip you $10 in 1964.
Steve McQueen?
Yeah, it's like getting a $50 bill.
Yeah.
McQueen, there was an actor at the time who had a television series called Adventures in Paradise named Garner McCrae. Great looking guy. Drove a white Rolls convertible, always with the top down, always had a suntan, and always had 3 girls with him. And he would tip you $10, right? And he was a great guy. And you kind of took care of these people, and you were their valet. And so when they came in, they want Steve to drive my Rolls Royce. Nobody drives my Rolls Royce but Steve. So it was a really great, and you were invited to parties, and you played softball, and you felt a part of something, even though you were going to school at the same time. So drag yourself up in the morning, go to class. Don't remember what I was learning, but go to class, get enough credit so you could graduate. But I couldn't wait to go back to the go-go. But in the meantime, I had another job. So when I got out of school, I had to work for my dad, who had a little market, a deli, and a restaurant. And I had to go pick up the bread in downtown and do that. And so I had another job in the meantime. And then I really wanted to earn a little bit extra, so I opened up a liquor store for a family friend in the morning when I really got up, before I went to work for my dad. And then I worked at the Go-Go. So I went to school. I did a liquor store, open up, went to school, worked for my dad, stayed up all night at the Go-Go, didn't do drugs, but we drank a lot of coffee and
you did what you had to do.
You mentioned your dad. I want to mention also that your mom was a pretty special woman.
oh yeah.
She was one of the first traveling salespeople.
Yeah, she was a pioneer. She was a female executive for Arden Cosmetics, and traveled throughout the country, opening up from New York. She was raised in New York, upstate New York, and was the eldest of 6 girls. My poor grandfather had 6 daughters. That's why I didn't talk a lot. But she said, I'm either going to help raise 5 sisters, or I'm going to strike out on my own. And so she went to Manhattan, got a job with the Kurlash Company. At the time, they were the company that did eyebrow tweezers and some beauty products, and met Elizabeth Arden, who said, I want you to come with me. Young woman. She was a young woman. We're going to build a company, and I need some front people. And so Mom was a front person for Arden. And she said, I know your name's Virginia Albarian, but I kind of like a different name, so let's pick a different name. So my mom became Verna Andre, and that's my mom. So,
And your mom's a terrific person.
She was interesting mom.
Yep.
So she traveled the country, opening Arden counters in all the new department stores that were now opening. So Macy's opened in Dallas or San Francisco, or Broadway opened somewhere. So she would go train the girls. She would do radio. I didn't even know she did radio. So when she passed away, we found a trunk that had all of her script. Throughout the year, she had it categorized by year, where it was. So if she was in Dallas, she would go to a radio station, and her script was announcer, Miss Andre. Announcer, Miss Andre. So she'd give the script to the announcer, and he'd say, oh, we have Miss Andre from Arden Cosmetics in here. Welcome, Miss Andre. Very similar to this. And what is Arden featuring today? Well, she'd say, well, whatever the guy's name was, because her script only said announcer. I'm sure she knew his name. And she'd say, well, we're featuring Arden Eyes, and if you want to come into the new Macy's downtown on such and such street, we'll be demonstrating blah, 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 blah. And then she was like the celebrity guest that would oversee the one of the girls that she trained to make up some of the ladies in New Arden Eyes. And then after that would go on for a bit, she'd go back to New York until the next assignment. And she traveled all over. So,
Steve, could you let me segue? Could you tell me the non-Jason Bateman story version of how you met Robert Mitchum?
Frank is referring to another one of these wonderful, what do you call them, blog podcasts, where I was kind of betrayed a little bit. Somebody used my name in an off-color story that I don't usually talk about any celebrity that I really might have done something that would not want anybody else to know. So I don't do that. But I met Mitchum. I was a mail boy. I'd had a blessed life. I had a neighbor who lived next door to us that their last name was Klinger. They were immigrants. He had a little bit of an accent. They were German Jews that had to escape Nazi Germany, and they did not have children. And he became the head of international publicity for Walt Disney Productions. And Walt Disney Productions was one of the few studios in the business. Walt Disney and Republic Studios were the two studios that their entire operation, their entire operation.
It's Jeff Robinoff.
Yeah, holy shit.
Back for more.
Yikes. No, it's not Jeff. But very funny, Frank. So anyway, I had gotten, they took us, either my brother or I, to every Disney something. So the premiere of Davy Crockett, I went to the premiere of Davy Crockett and met Davy Crockett. So it kind of, although I didn't have family in the business, I was smitten by it, right? So they took us to everything. I had the distinct honor of being at the premiere opening of Disneyland when Ronald Reagan was on the air, and we walked by. Hey, don't I know that actor over there who's standing in front of a microphone talking about Disney with 2 television cameras on him? Got a chance to sit next to Annie Oakley, Gail Davis in the Carnation ice cream place. You know, we're at Disneyland. What is this place? It's like the greatest place on earth. So that was in 1955. I'm a little older than I look, but
so you're about 10 years old, 9 years old?
Yeah. That a boy. That's about where I was. Thanks. Tell everybody how old I am. Anyway, perfect. So anyway, that's how I got smitten by all this. So I was in college, and Walter said, "What are you doing this summer?" And I said, "I don't know. Probably work for my dad. You know, I think he wants me to work for him a little bit." He goes, "You know, Warner Brothers is." My friend Carl Schaefer at Warner Brothers is kind of, they put together a studio tour. You know, Universal started a tour, and Jack Warner wants to feel out the concept of a tour at Warner Brothers, and they hired a tour company to put together a tour as an experiment, and they're looking for guys, men, boys to be tour guides. You know, it was weird. Back in those days, it was always boys. I don't know why it wasn't girls, but it was boys. And they're looking for boys to be tour guides. Do you think you'd like to be a tour guide? I said, "What does it pay?" He said, "What do you care? It's a great job." So, okay. So you go down and see Mr. Schaefer. Unless you really screw it up, you get the job. So I went and saw Mr. Schaefer and got hired as a tour guide and spent the summer between my freshman and sophomore year as a tour guide at Warner Brothers, working for a concessionaire, if you want. It was a concessionaire. So my paycheck came from the concessionaire. We only worked 6 hours. So if you only worked 6 hours, you couldn't get unionized. And so the studios were all unions and suspect about who are these tour guides. And so you worked 6 hours. They didn't have to pay any benefits if you worked 6 hours. So you had 2 shifts, either the morning shift or afternoon shift.
They didn't have to feed you either.
They didn't have to feed you either. So,
6 hours of feed.
So we had indoctrination a couple weeks for which they paid us probably minimum wage at that time, and then paid us peanuts, and we came in and had to show up in black shoes, blue socks, gray trousers, and a white shirt, and they gave us a clip-on necktie that was blue and red and a beautiful fitted tailored blazer by the Warner Brothers tailor shop with a Warner Brothers crest logo, and so the tour guides were coat and tie, as were many of the crew members back in the 60s. So this was very early 60s and mid 60s. And a lot of the crew guys wore coat and ties, and so everybody dressed. And we were tour guides, and it was a great job. You know, you met tons of people. You stood on, they had these trams that they had leased from the Venice Tram Company that used to do the boardwalk at Venice Beach, that you sat back to back. So they were kind of a slow-moving electric tram that people could hop on and hop off. and you sat back to back. So it was just a big long bench on either side. That's what they used for the tours, and we stood on the back with a regular megaphone, not a power megaphone. Oh, we're coming up to stage 6, and it's famous for Casablanca and blah, blah, blah. And we had our whole spiel, and you could get out. And at the time, I was a tour guide. Blake Edwards was doing the Great Race on the lot, and they had pretty much 8 sound stages in the entire back lot. And at that time, stage 16, which is it was stage 7 at the time. Now stage 16 at Warner Brothers was a former Busby Berkeley stage back in the day, before my time. I'm not that old. And I had the biggest indoor tank in Hollywood at the time. And
Tank for swimming pools and
oh yeah, huge.
water scenes and
enormous.
everything.
It's a 34,000 square foot stage with mostly a big tank that went down to 20 feet deep, because in the Busby Berkeley movies, the girls dove into the water and had to be deep, with camera ports underneath, etc. And Blake Edwards used it for the sequence of the Atlantic crossing in the Great Race. If you've ever seen the Great Race, they put the it's comedy, so they put the cars on icebergs, and that's how they float across the Atlantic.
Didn't you also make Clooney's movie?
Yes, Perfect Storm.
Perfect Storm in
Yeah,
that tank?
we did that in that stage, which I got to use the stage for what it was built for. We also did Chris Nolan's, a couple of Chris Nolan movies in there. We did the scene in Inception where he's sitting with Ken, what was it, Watanabe, was that his name?
Ken Watanabe.
Yeah. DiCaprio's sitting across the table with the spinning thing, and if you remember, the roof opens up and it's flushed with water. We did that in there, and then the last film I did in that set was what was it? Was with Chris Nolan, Dunkirk, and we did where you saw Dunkirk, where the ship sinks and gets filled up with water with all the guys in it, and the one guy got out, and everybody else went down with the ship, and we did that in that stage, and they built that part of the ship, and then you fill it from the bottom up with water and have people swimming in there. It's a great stage, great concept for a film, so yeah, I did get work in that stage. We did a ton of stuff in there. We did Ocean's 13 in that stage, and Jerry Weintraub, who is also just someone I did a ton of movies with and loved Jerry. And Jerry called me every day. When he died, I just cried my eyes out. But because he literally called me every morning. When you had a BlackBerry, and you got
which
those
you had
things,
up until last year, I think.
Yeah, I did. I love my BlackBerry. I could send text without even looking here, and I constantly hit the wrong button. But he'd call me in the morning and say, "You up yet?" And I'd look at what time it was when he sent me the text, and it's like 4:30 in the morning. What the hell? I get it. He called me as soon as you get up. Call him, everything okay? He goes, yeah, I just missed you. Wanted to tell you I loved you.
Yeah. So back to Mitchum.
Oh. So I was going to tell you. So I did that job, went to school, finished school, and it was a tough time because this Vietnam War was starting to get serious, and my dad said, let's go. It's a long story short, but let's go down to the draft board and see what your status is. You're going to graduate in May. We went to the draft board, which was in North Hollywood, California. There were these nice older women in there, and they had no computers, but they had ledgers with names, and they were all registered by your number. So they were in numerical order. So you showed them your selective service card, and they go to that number, go to your name. They said, well, you have a 2S deferment. And I said, yes, but I graduate. And of course, school sends them notice if you graduate. So it wasn't a secret. Wouldn't have been a secret. I graduate in May. What are the odds that I'll get drafted? She goes, oh, honey, 100%. Not even 90%, 100% within 2 months. So there was no lottery, there was no anything. So it was, this
Right.
is Europe. It was 66. Wow. What are we going to do? My dad said, well, I think it was all a setup. God bless him. I have a friend who's the head of, he's a commander of the North Hollywood Navy Reserve. I want you to go talk to him. We go there. He said, I'll go with you. We made an appointment, went and saw this Commander Carnos. I remember like it was yesterday. Nice looking man, nice Navy uniform. He's the commander of that reserve unit. And he says, well, Stephen, he said, he had yet again another ledger. Opens up the ledger and he says, you see all these names? This is a waiting list to get into the Navy Reserve program. He said, but I adore your dad, and so I'm going to put your name on the top of the list. But I'm only going to do it today.
Wow.
Like, what does that mean? He said, well, you can join today. I haven't graduated. I'm still in school. It's okay. He said, you can finish school and, you come to a weekend meeting. They'll probably have you sweep the floors or something until you graduate. And then you go on active duty for 2 years. Wow. My dad said, let's go take a walk. He went and took a walk. He goes, don't be stupid. This is a real opportunity. You don't want to get drafted. You want to have some control of your own life. This is a great opportunity. I think you should do it. I said, should I call Mom? He goes, no, don't call Mom.
Don't call me. Nothing to do with this.
Don't call your mother. No, this is you can tell her
Afterward, yeah.
afterwards. So, man, that was a rough one. I'd been free. I'd been in Europe. I'd been this kind of footloose guy, and all of a sudden, wow, am I really going to do this? I did it. So I enlisted, and I spent 2 years in the Navy. And when I got out, Dad said, what do you want to do? You want to come, I don't want to do this forever. You want to come and work at the store and all that, and maybe you take it over. And I said, oh, no. I want to be in showbiz. Well, what are you going to do? I don't know. But I'm going to go down and put my application into all the studios. And I went to Warner Brothers first because I knew Warner Brothers. And I went to the personnel department that had 2 people in it in those days. You got to remember, this is 68. All the major studios, the studio was the production unit. All the business offices, publicity, distribution, were all in New York. So Warner Brothers was all in New York. Columbia was all in New York. Fox was all in New York. Paramount. The studios were simply the factory that made movies. And the same factory that I just tried to describe with a head, Jack Warner, a head of creative, a head of production, a head of marketing. They were in New York, but the production was all in Hollywood. So I went to Warner's. The nice lady, the personnel office was right by the main gate and had glass windows with a little pass-through and a little stool to sit on. I mean, right by the main gate, too, on your right.
Mm-hmm.
Drove in. I parked somewhere on the street, walked up, looked in, nobody. There's a lady in there. Hello? Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm going to fill out an application. Oh, sure. She said, handed me an application, and I had a pen. Do you need a pen? No, I have my own pen. She says, I'm sorry, honey, there aren't any jobs available right now, but I can keep your fill it out, and I'll keep it on file and put down what you'd like to do. And she disappeared. So I filled out the application. There was a little teeny box. That said, have you ever worked here before? A little check. Yeah. And I put the dates. And so she took my application. She read it and said, oh, you went to school and you put down you'll take any job. And what caught her eye was you worked here before. And she said, oh, you worked here before? I said, yeah, I was a tour guide here and 4 years ago or 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I remember the tour, and she said, what have you been doing? And I said, well, I just got out of the military. Oh, well, Warner Brothers has a policy that returning servicemen get first crack at any job. And that was probably a World War II policy when guys were going in the service.
Colonel Jack Warner.
Yeah, under Colonel Jack Warner. So she said, oh, honey, what would you like to do? And I said, I'll do anything. And she said, oh, you have a business background, and but I suggest you apply for the mailroom because all the big shots here worked in the mailroom at one time. Sounds good to me. So I put down mailroom, and she said, there's not a position available, but the next position available, I'll call you. I went home. I went to all the other studios and filled out applications, and none of them were as gregarious as this older lady whose name was Jerry Baccarat. And I got a call about 4 weeks later. It's a position available. You have to go and interview with the head of the mailroom. And if he likes you, you'll have to interview with the general manager of the studio. So I went and interviewed with the head of the mailroom at the time. And he said, well, you have to go and interview with Hal Holman, who's the studio manager. And so I said, well, do I come back? He goes, no, let me make a call, and maybe you can go see him. He called. I had to go, but I waited a little bit, and I walked in. And here's this man sitting behind the desk, and on the wall behind him is this picture in a Navy uniform with Admiral stars, right? So Admiral, right? So he said, oh, Stephen, please sit down. I sat down, and he asked me a couple questions. And so I'm kind of like, when you're in the Navy, you say yes, sir, to most people. But if you're an admiral, you say yes, admiral. I mean, that's Navy protocol. You don't just say yes, sir. Oof, what do I do? So he asked me a question, and I said, yes, admiral. And he said, looked at my application. Oh, you were in the Navy. What'd you do? And you start talking about the Navy. And we never even talked about anything. What'd you do? Tell me about what you did. You know, I've been retired. I'm a reserve admiral. And, you know, he asked me what I did and talked to me about, did you go to Vietnam? What happened? And we sat there and talked for 2 hours about him asking me about today's Navy. And I was just like amazed. And so I finally, he said, I've got to run. Stood up and he said, welcome to Warner Brothers.
That was it.
That was it. So I'm a mail boy, Robert Mitchum.
Big Bob, we're getting back to him
Mail
somehow.
boy. You heard I said mail boy. No disrespect to anybody. We were boys,
Right.
and that's all we were. No girls. And that's what we were called, mail boys. And yes, I'm old, and we had a telegraph department, literally a telegraph department. So they said, Papazian, go to telegraph and take this, you have to take a telegram down to Mitchum. Who the hell's Mitchum? He's on stage 12 doing a movie. Robert Mitchum? Yeah. Shit. I go to telegraph, but I did my indoctrination, so I knew. You waited for the red light. That means they're shooting on the stage to end before you entered. I'm still pretty fresh, wet behind the ear mail boy. I got my going to telegram. He said, gave me a book with a pen. Got to sign for it. Make sure he signs for it. Don't give it to him unless he signs for it. Well, it's chicken and the egg. Do I give it to him? And then what if he says, I'm not going to sign? Do I take it back? I don't know. So I use my own discretion. So I go up, wait. Light goes off. As I'm going to hit the door, everybody's vacating the stage on a break, right? So I, like a fish going upstream, I go into the stage and wait. And pretty soon, Mitchum comes offset with another, doing a Western and cowboy stuff with another cowboy. And they're walking past me and they're kind of talking. Do I want to interrupt him? Finally, he came right by me and I said, excuse me, Mr. Mitchum, I have a telegram for you. He looked at me and just kept walking. He's holding up my telegram. Oh, shit. I got my telegram. He just walked right by me. What do I do now? So I waited. What am I going to do? Walked out behind him. They smoked a cigarette. He went and got in a trailer, one of those little doll houses.
Like we had ahead of the class.
Same doll. Probably that doll that Frank did. So I waited. And pretty soon an AD came, an assistant director came by and knocked on the door. Mr. Mitchum, 2 minutes, we need you back on set. Waited, stepped out of the trailer. I said, excuse me, Mr. Mitchum, I have a telegram for you. And he said, well, you're a persistent little cuss, aren't you? And I said, well, it's an important telegram. He took it from me and I said, you got to sign for it. He took the pen, he signed the book. He said, what do? You just deliver telegrams? I said, oh, no, I'm a mailboy at Warner Brothers. And he said, why don't you come around the set once in a while? He goes, come and say hi.
Wow.
Boom. And he
Nice.
went. So I'm not going to go visit Robert Mitchum, but I'm riding my bicycle full of mail down to the back lot one day, and I drive by the set, and he and some other cowboys are smoking cigarettes, taking a break out in front of the stage. He goes, hey, there's a mailboy kid. Hey, come on over here. And I went over, and he said, what are you doing? And deliver mail. What does it look like? And we talked a little bit, and he said, how come you don't come by and say hi? I said, I'm busy. Deliver mail. So anyway, some period later, it was time to graduate from the mailroom. You don't stay in the mailroom. It's not a career. So I don't remember how many months or if it's a year, but what do I want to do? What are the opportunities? I had a business background and you meet people, and you'd been in various departments, and that's how it was like. The mailroom was like film school before film school. You got to go to every department. Every department taught you how to break down a camera. You would volunteer and you'd go down and you'd load film for the next day. The head of the department would show you how to break down a camera, talk to you about lenses. How do you lens a movie? Why do you go from a 200 to a 50 and in the same scene? Why, if we're sitting here, do I use another lens for your close-up and not just a zoom? So you cut, and you put a new lens in the camera, and you start up, and maybe I favor a bit of Frank, and it's a little different angle, but it's a better lens. And why the lens? It's a more dramatic lens for a point. And you learned about how to make movies. And you went in editing, and they sat you down and talked to you about editing. And in those days, they used moviolas and real film that went through the strips into the moviola, and they have the headgear on, and learned about music editing and sound editing and how the three in those days came together on mag stripe film. You got to remember, this is analog days. So you got to learn a lot about filmmaking. But it's time to kind of get a real job, because I think it wasn't like I needed a lot of money back then. This is in the 60s, late 60s. I think I cleared $87 a week and couldn't spend $87 a week. You worked all the time. I had a roommate. Our rent was $125 a month that we split, and that's $67.50 if I do the math right. And I made $87 in 1 week. How am I going to spend all that money? So it was great. But you don't want to make $87 for the rest of your life, so you go try to get another job. And I got an opportunity to learn about location finance, film finance being cost tracking. When you work on a film, you have an accountant. Now every film has its own accounting staff. Not then. The studio accounting staff was on every film. And so I got a job in the studio accounting staff and got a chance to do a location because they fired some guy. And I went to Durango, Mexico. And lo and behold, ran into Bob Mitchum. And, hey, it's the kid from the mailroom. You got a telegram? I said, no telegram. I'm now working in I'm the guy who's going to give you your per diem. Oh, you're an important guy. So anyway, he said, we're all going to Mazatlan for the weekend. Want to come along? I said, what's Mazatlan? He goes, it's the beach city that's about an hour from here. Guys are driving us. Come, jump a ride. Come. Yeah, I didn't know where I was going to stay. We're all staying at the Hotel Playa, Mazatlan. We'll get you a room there. So, I mean, he's going to make a reservation. Is he going to pay for it? I don't really want him to pay for it. Just come. So we go to Mazatlan. He paid for a room. He had a room right on the beach, and I had a room that looked at the mountain in the back, but who gave a shit? And we kind of hung out a little bit. And he was a big drinker, and he was with some guys, and he was having a great time. And I got to meet all of them, and got to meet a guy who became a really good friend, Rudy Diaz, who was he's a whole other story that I could write a book on. But he was Indian and played a tough Indian in all these movies. He played Cochise. He was in a Gregory Peck movie, McKenna's Gold, as an Indian. But he was just a block of a guy, a handsome older man, very dark-skinned Indian. And we all kind of hung out. And so Mitchum and some guys needed a fourth for gin rummy. You play gin? I said, I play gin. Yeah, my dad taught me gin. Been playing gin with my dad forever. Come on, sit in. He said, yeah, you're pretty good. He said, we're all going to Duke's to play gin. You want to go to Duke's? And I said, I'll go anywhere. I'm here. Cool. Casual, just swim trunks, flip-flops, whatever. We're all going to go to Duke's. So I figure we're going to some restaurant or some shit. We go down to the wharf, and here's this yacht that's 200 feet.
Duke.
It's John Wayne's boat. And I'm this schmuck, this kid. And he says, we're going to play gin. I had no idea that it was John Wayne's boat. It was just a big yacht. Shit, is this Duke's? I look to see if the name is Duke's. It's the Wild Goose. Still don't know what I'm doing. Come aboard, and here's John Wayne. No shirt, pair of trunks. Not Speedos, but in those days, trunks weren't board shorts. And pair of sandals, kind of sandals, or tennis shoes, or sneakers, or something. And that's it. And a silly looking captain's hat. No, one of those old, like
Sinatra wore.
Sinatra wore. They all wore them. That's stupid with a thing, an anchor on it.
Cab Calloway wore one too.
Here's John Wayne.
Amazing.
And it's like, who's the kid? He's going to be our fourth in gin. Hey, welcome, little fella. And I'm playing gin with these guys, and as we're playing gin, they are getting drunker and drunker, and I'm kicking their ass playing gin. I mean, they are smoking cigarettes and drinking. I mean,
was this a penny a point type thing, or?
It was whatever it was.
You made a few $87 a week.
I think I made a little money.
Yeah,
I made a week's salary, and so I became a popular guy because I could play gin.
That's a great story.
That's how I met Mitchum, and we, for a couple of years, went to Mazatlan to celebrate his birthday and Rudy Diaz's birthday, and my brother came down, and I've got a great picture that Frank has seen with us, a whole gaggle of us, and here's Bob Mitchum, the guy with the big dark glasses, the old movie star, and he was got a little older by then, and liked a cocktail a lot, but he was a really nice man, and he talked to me about the movie business, and so as you could guess, I was hook, line, and sinker. It was all I wanted to do was make movies, but how do you get into making movies from a guy who's keeping track of per diem and hot costs, right? Daily hot costs. Mm-hmm. So the progression was there, the opportunity was there. Not sure it's anywhere near what it was. People don't really stick with companies, but the companies cared about you if you were good and you cared about the company, and you knew that there was going to be some progression. Whether you could get to your goal or not was another story. You really had to apply yourself, and I learned from my parents that if you get a job, you do it better than anybody else. If you can do it better than anybody else, you do it better than anybody else. And I can remember when I got my job and as a production accountant guy, opened up an office, and they said, Steve, you got to go down to the storeroom, and you gotta. Here's a list. Here's the purchase order for all the office supplies. You can bring them back before you go home. Bring them to the office. Everybody's coming in tomorrow. We're going to open up the office. So I went to the storeroom, and it was staplers and pencils and notepads and stuff like that for the office. And so, what good is a pencil if it's not sharpened? So I took every box of pencils and sharpened them. I put staples in the stapler. And so when everybody came in, they were on their desk. Their stapler had staples in it. And so the guy, my boss, came in and he goes, who put all the staples in the stapler and who did that? And I said, I did it before I went home. Holy shit, no one's ever done that before. I said, well, what good is a stapler without staples, right? And so you do that kind of stuff. And I guess sometimes it impressed people. Sometimes they were taken aback by it and say, who is this kid? But you did a good job.
And ultimately, that led you to be the headliner or be the key person on the Harry Potter franchise, which is the greatest franchise in film history. And you were probably the only executive ever that worked on the entire franchise.
No, it was kind of like, Frank, it was the one thing that was a little bit like doing episodic television because you got to know everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was over, you felt a loss. Like, what do I do tomorrow? My God, head of the class is not anymore. Am I ever going to, I got to see Frank. I can't. We saw each other every day.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like that. It was a labor of love. I'm the one who selected where we would film it, and it was an old mosquito bomber factory from World War II. The runway was still on the property. They had done a tiny bit of one of the Star Wars movies there. It was a big old barn, right? You can imagine it was a bomber factory. But I learned that cars are built from the ground up. Airplanes are built from the ceiling down. So it had tall ceilings and heights so we could build big sets. Because airplanes, they hang them and they go through the assembly line from the top down. So it was a great place. We had tons of exterior place, at least the place out for a period of time to make the first movie. And as we got into the movie, I could see, wow, this is going to be something. So I negotiated an extension on the lease that would at least get us to another movie. Had a little bit of foresight that there's going to be another one of these. Although there was no guarantee, you could kind of taste it. And so we did 8 of the Harry Potters there. And when I wanted to go buy the place, the landlord was smart enough to know, why would I sell it to you when I know you're going to keep leasing it? Mm-hmm. I made a long-term lease with an option to buy. He gave me an option to buy, and when we finished, we exercised our option. And it's now Warner Brothers Studios, Leavesden in Watford, England. And it went from the 8 theoretical sound stages that we used into a 15-stage full-service studio, and I'm very proud that I started it all.
And they've opened a museum there too, haven't they?
We opened up a Harry Potter, the making of Harry Potter. My colleague, Roy Button, had the foresight, which I approved, and that was not throwing one thing away. And we had to move stuff around constantly, but we kept every piece of every paraphernalia that was ever manufactured for Harry Potter. And there was nothing in Harry Potter that was bought from a shelf. Everything was made from a teacup to a pen and quill, to everything was manufactured in London, much of it at the studio and the shop for that movie. So, and if you look at the splendor of Harry Potter and the intricacies of that piece, you will appreciate that all of that is now on display in London. And I managed to move it all around by paying for warehouse space, etc. I went to our CFO at the time, who is my fantasy baseball partner today. We had our draft yesterday, and I'm a little worried about stolen bases, but we have a good team, Ed Romano, and I said, I'm moving this stuff around, but I'm just charging it into the films. He said, yeah, save it all, Steve, charge it, budget it in the next film and save it all. So I saved it all. And ultimately, we built a museum out of everything. So if you go to London, go out to Watford, go to the Harry Potter experience, and you'll see you'll have a beautiful vestibule. You can have some tea, and then you go into a little screening area, and they'll greeted by a young Dan Radcliffe that welcomes you to Harry Potter, and they give you a little background, and then the screen goes up and the wall opens up, and there's the Great Hall. And it's as it exists today.
That's great.
It's the Great Hall. Every piece of that was manufactured from the cobbles on the floor that were beautifully laid. It's all right there. I got to go to the opening, and what really was the heartwarming moment was when I was on the opposite side of the wall when the first group of guests opened up, and I looked at the faces of these young girls when they looked and saw the Great Hall. One of them dropped to her knees and started sobbing.
Wow.
And so I just said, wow, we did good.
Speaking of sobbing, I owe my career to you.
Not really.
Well, you hired
I
me.
owe part of my career to you.
Well, it's nice of you to say. But one of the things
Nice to hear.
one of the things we shared was we were the first Eastern company, a Western company, to go to Moscow.
We did. How did you get that job, Frank? Remind me.
How
How did I meet you?
Well,
How did you
I'm
guys
gonna-
meet? I'd like to know that.
okay. So, in 1981, Steve had a friend by the name of Joe Simon who worked at Service Systems Corporation.
He was the head of.
He was
service.
head of Service Systems Corporation, and Steve was running the. I believe he was running the commissary. Formerly running the commissary at that time.
I was thankfully doing television by that moment.
Yes, and Joe Simon had a friend by the name of Stu Barber, who had been the offensive line coach for the Chicago Winds in the World Football League when I was the PR director of the Chicago Winds. So now it's 1980.
Have you ever told that story? No.
I have.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I have. A quick story about Stu. Stu was an all-pro offensive lineman. He was about 6'4", 260, 270.
Big man.
Big guy. And I was a PR guy, and I kept trying to get him to take a picture. And he said, he had a gruff exterior. He said, no. He said, no. And then I finally got pissed off, or fake pissed off. I threw my keys. I threw my keys on his desk, and I said, all right, I've had it. Let's go, you and me. I'm not taking any more of your shit. And he bust up, and we became friends ever since. So now it's 1981, and Stu is now the general manager of the Buffalo Bills, where Service System Corporation is headquartered. So,
And operates all the concessions at Rich Stadium
yes,
for food.
yeah.
Like
So-
Harry M. Stevens.
Yeah.
So I am running a college football all-star game with my friend Armin Kate, who was a previous guest. And Stu was there scouting the game because Marcus Allen was playing in the game. Art Schleister, your buddy,
My buddy.
was playing in the game. Stu invited Joe Simon. Joe Simon invited Steve. So Steve came down and was the guest at the game. And Steve and I sort of hit it off. And he said, Joe gave me an assignment.
You had a commercial company at the time.
I was with the advertising agency, but I was trying to get into television production.
Yeah, hadn't you done like a PSA Airlines commercial? Or
Yeah, I had done
something?
some. I had hustled up some
Yeah.
little crap here and there. But Joe Simon, from that meeting, gave me a job. Gave me a film, industrial film.
Right.
And I roped Jay Thomas to host it. I got John Neighbor, the Olympic swimmer, to be in it. I got Pat Hayden, the quarterback of the Rams, to be in
Small hands.
it with the small hands. Ty Youngs, who was Mr. America, and Kathy Rigby. So I got all of these people in it. So we made a movie. And Steve said, "Well, when you're ever up at Warner Brothers, look me up.
Come see me.
Come see me." So I was probably there 2 days later. And we just hit it off and we became great friends.
Yeah. And I was doing television. At the time, they brought me in to do the sitcom area in production. It was we were doing things on videotape, and I was kind of one of the few people who understood tape and tape television, on a film lot. So that's a longer story that we don't have time for today, but I got that job because I helped, when I was working with the Burbank Studios, I helped negotiate the first IATSC a live and tape production on a film lot. And Alice was a Warner Brothers television series that Barry Meyer and Bob Daly wanted to bring to Warner Brothers from CBS, which is a broadcast facility, one is NABIT, is a union, National Association of Broadcast Technicians. The other is the IATSE, which is the International Stage and Television agreement, and there was no provision for videotape. There were no categories, no anything for tape. And I said, okay, well then we got to figure it out. So I was put on a team to negotiate a contract with the IA for tape on a film lot. So we had to come up with categories and an AD instead of an assistant director, and a TD and a utility technician. And we had to negotiate rates that were reasonably competitive with NABIT, which were far lower rates than a standard IA, and everybody said it was impossible. You're never going to get a grip to work for, $1.80 less than what he can make on a film show. So we did it. And how I transitioned into television, I got a call from Barry Meyer and Art Stolnitz and said, come over here. Look, you helped us bring Alice here. Now we need somebody that knows how to do it from a studio perspective. We're not supposed to raid the Burbank studios, but if you could get Columbia to say okay, because it was, remember, a partnership between Columbia and Warner Brothers, who I really work for, we'll hire you as production supervisor for film and tape production. Nobody ever talked about money. They just said they're going to hire you. And really? I went and saw the heads of production from Columbia, John Beach, who did movies, who was me back then, head of the production for movies, and Seymour Friedman, who was Columbia Television, the competing television, but on the same lot. And said, I have this opportunity. I need your blessing. And they said, you got it. So I got my job at Warner Brothers. So I was doing film and tape. We were getting aggressive. We made a deal with Reinhold Wiege, who was a showrunner on Barney Miller at the time for Danny Arnold. Warner's made a multi-series deal. I worked with Ronald Lee. We did a short-lived series called The Associates, 6 episodes.
Joey Gaboto was in it.
Yeah, yeah. And The Associates did a couple of ill-fated pilots. One that was great with Martin Short called Dads with Marky Post and Selma Diamond. And I had met Frank in the meantime, and we did Head of the Class, which was a television series Rich Eustace, Michael Elias developed. It was the opposite situation where the kids were smart and the teacher was a hippy-dippy guy. And we did I think a half a season to start with. I think we were given 13. Did a whole season.
Oh, no, half a season.
Half
yeah,
a season.
13.
I think we started with a half
Yeah,
a
you
season.
always start with 13. And
Yeah,
then you
and
get
it was
9,
kind of
back
a
9.
midterm thing, mid-season thing. We did half a season. And it was a good show, but the back, my area was, I thought, could be better from both a fiduciary perspective and kind of someone with a bit more foresight. And so I asked Frank.
Yeah, you asked me quicker than that because if you remember, they were looking for an associate producer on Growing Pains.
Yes.
And I went to interview for that, and also Henry Johnson went to interview for that.
Correct.
And Henry Johnson got the job.
Yes.
But you said be patient. So then...
And I liked Henry. And
Yeah,
ultimately, as
for
you
sure.
well know, hired Henry, and he was my partner
Yes.
in television for years.
Yes.
So, you lost the job to maybe one of the best.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
and who ultimately kind of became a boss of yours.
Yep, for sure. So then on the second episode of Head of the Class, you had me meet with the producer.
Right.
And she didn't hire me either. And you said, stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
You'll be back. 2 days later, I was back and she hired me. She must have got a severe talking to from Steve. And then at the end of the year, I replaced her.
Yeah, I finally got my wish, and she got the highway and he got the job. And
that led to the third year.
The rest of his is history.
And then it led to the third year when we went to Moscow.
We did, which was, I think you've covered some of that in these blogs, but my perspectives are a touch different than yours. But we did do the impossible.
No telephones, no computers.
No, and it probably aged me a little bit from a perspective like, oh my God, I know someone's gone to the gulag and we're never going to see him again on my watch. It was a broken Soviet Union that we were in. They were so suppressive. There KGB all over the place. People were afraid to look you in the eye. You'd walk down the street and they knew you were not one of them, and they didn't even want to look at you. They just would turn their head and walk, just because if they looked at you, they could maybe get in trouble. It was pretty sad, but we managed to pull it off, and it was an experience of a lifetime. You asked me about my wanderlust, and I want to be able to do what no one else has ever done, and we did it on that one. I'm not sure I ever duplicated it. Came close, but that was a wild west.
And you were really throwing the dice, right? I mean, going behind the iron curtain with this. I mean, if this thing blows up,
and nobody had shot
financially,
nobody had shot in the then Soviet Union.
No, we had no idea.
And we had a special guest with us, the heavyweight champion of the world.
Yeah,
Mike Tyson,
who was a tag along.
Yep, he was a tag along.
Who was wow.
You gotta elaborate.
I saw Mike many years later on the set of The Hangover, and reintroduced myself and said, we spent some time at Moscow together on head of the class. And he goes, really? Sorry, Mike. He said, I think I was married to one of those girls back then. I said, yeah, you were. You were a pain in the ass. And he goes, I've always been a pain in the ass, and laughed. And that was
it. Do you remember the story of Lennon's Tomb?
Oh, boy, do I.
Why don't you tell it?
So Mike comes down to set. How about the one story real quick where we took everybody to lunch in that Georgian restaurant,
right?
Which maybe was one of the better lunches that we had while we were there. And Michael was there with Robin, and they brought all the food out because, they just kind of brought the food out. It wasn't like we ordered. They brought the food out. And Michael said, I can't eat any of that. What is that? And Robin said, Michael, you got to behave. It's good. It's cheese. You can eat cheese. Yeah, I can't. Anyway, so pretty soon the entire kitchen staff comes out with a bouquet of gladiolas that was the only flowers I saw the entire time we were in Russia, Moscow. Presented them to Mike Tyson and called him Muhammad Ali. Well, that did it. Mike very ingraciously got up and bolted. Mike Tyson got up and left, and Robin, whoa, Michael, she chases him out of the restaurant. Oh, God. So he takes off, and that was Mike Tyson. So he was a pest. He was around. It never really, everywhere he went, it was
chaos, destruction.
Kind of like, got to take care of Mike Tyson. I'm trying to do a television show in the middle of a broken country, and I got this pain in the ass around. So it was like babysitting Mike Tyson. But I got lost.
Kremlin with a long line.
Oh, yeah, Kremlin.
Me, you, and Tyson.
We're shooting in the Kremlin. There's a long, long line of people, including brides and grooms. Mm-hmm. Multiple brides and grooms, standing in line patiently, as were all Soviets then standing in line for something. And I remember asking one person, what are you standing in line for? And they said, I'm not sure, but for whatever it is, must have a value or there wouldn't be a line. And they stood in line.
Amazing.
He didn't know. So that's where we were filming. So Mike says, what are they standing in line for? Well, brides. I said, well, it's Lenin's tomb. The tradition for young bride and grooms to visit Lenin's tomb, pay homage to the founder of communism. Oh, can I go? I said, sure. And so, of course,
he said, let's go see this.
Let's go see this. So we had KGB working with us all over the place, and they pulled rank and put him right in the front of the line, and down he goes. So Lenin's tomb is down there, and Mike goes out down there. Frank and I are not far,
right behind
waiting. He comes out with a look on his face like, holy shit.
He looked like he had seen the ghost.
He did.
And he had.
He came out and he was freaked out. And he said, that guy's dead. And we said, yeah, it's his tomb. Well, those are Frank Pace and Steve Papazian stories in there.
The guy is dead, and he's in a tomb.
Multiple of those through the years.
Yeah. And you know, I have to. I would be if I would be wrong if I didn't say that. You know, Don Rickles always used to say, for two guys to get along, to really get along, their wives have to be good friends.
Yeah.
And no matter how good a friendship Steve and I had, if it wasn't for Charlene and Karen getting along as good as they did, we couldn't be friends.
Well, it's been 40 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time of a friendship. And we traveled together. We went to Europe together. We vacationed together. They were just our guests in Hawaii. And I love Frank like a brother.
And I love you as well. I love you as well.
So it's an honor to do this with you guys.
An honor to have you.
If I told you I listened to every one of them, I would be lying. But I absolutely adored your time with Michael Elias and adore Michael Elias. And looking back on it now, he was an interesting guy. He was part of our Moscow trip prior. And he was another one of the reasons where I thought we're never going to get through this. Frank and I had to not only babysit Michael, Mike Tyson, we had to babysit Michael Elias.
And Larry Little.
And Larry, and a whole bunch of other people.
For sure.
And Judy Garland, and all of them.
Not the Judy Garland. The Judy Garland had a travel agency of the same name.
But Michael, I think he talked about it a little bit. Neglected to tell you this part of it, but Michael's sister is married to a world famous architect, and she is the manager of their wonderful restaurant in London called the River Cafe. So one of our stops, we went to Russia on very circuitous routes.
Yeah, we went 3 times.
Yeah, and the routes
months.
were always different.
Yeah.
I mean, one through Copenhagen and Austria, and one through London, and Frank and I flew on an Aeroflot, a big Aeroflot plane back to London. Their giant equivalent to a 747.
By the way, I want to mention that when Steve was leaving Moscow, somebody asked him, would he ever return? He said, yeah, but I'll be in a B-52 bomber.
So Frank and I, in this first class, were the only ones in first class in the equivalent of a 747. The plane left at, we had to get there at 4 o'clock in the morning. And we get on the plane, and I asked the flight attendant, it's now 6 o'clock in the morning, who is made up like she's going to the ball with more eyeliner and purple stuff and in her uniform.
Miss Verna wouldn't have liked it.
No. And I said, think I could get some coffee? 6 o'clock in the morning. He's coming. Okay. Plane taxiing, takes off. Up we go in this giant plane. Think I could get some coffee? It's coming. Cool. Then next thing you know, they come with a napkin and a tray and give us caviar and whatever. And we're both looking at each other, and it's now 6:30 in the morning, and we're having caviar, and she comes with a wine and a dad. That was what we were getting. So we finally got our main course, which whatever that was, and I said, how about some coffee? It's coming. And they brought it with dessert, and that was what she was trained to do, and that's what they got. And wow! So we flew to London, and as we're coming into London in this giant aircraft, I'm looking out the window and I'm noticing they're flying all over London. Where the hell is the airport? And I said to Frank, they're doing bombing calculations on this plane. It's going up the river, around the corner, and all they're doing is that they're photographing for a bombing run, a future bombing run. We finally put down I said, that's it. That's my last Russian plane. Well, it wasn't my last one. My last one was a crappy Aeroflot from Moscow to Finland. When as soon as the wheels went up, I mean, they weren't even up. The smoking light went off, and everybody in the airplane lit a cigarette, and the place engulfed in smoke, and you could see it swirling around because we hadn't even pressurized yet, and it was like your eyes were bleeding because there was so much smoke in the cabin. It was like a smoke out. And then they served us pink chicken on a metal tray. It was pink chicken. I can't wait. I'm never going back. I am going back in a B-52. I didn't eat it. And the guy next to me didn't speak English, but he kept looking at my chicken after he ate his. And I said, took my chicken, ate my chicken, offered me a cigarette. I smoked one of those terrible Russian cigarettes, got green in the gills from watching him eat the chicken. I couldn't wait till we got to Finland. That was my last Aeroflot.
We call that taking a feed in the fire department. Like the smoke is just you take a feed,
Oh
you get
my
a beat,
God.
take a beat.
It was something else. So anyway, we did the impossible, and I've done other impossible. Doing a film in Bulgaria, we did second 300 in Bulgaria. We had been invited to Bulgaria. I had
300. That starred Brad Pitt.
Pardon me?
Did that star Brad Pitt?
No.
Oh,
Brad Pitt. We did Troy.
Troy.
Troy was done London, Malta, and believe it or not, Cabo. That's another story. We had planned to do the Great Wall and the battle scenes in Morocco. And we were going to do, we scouted locations, and we found a location in Essaouira. Essaouira is really on the Atlantic coast in Morocco. And it was perfect. It was a pristine beach, the most beautiful beach you'd ever seen along the Atlantic western coast, with beautiful sunsets, and it was kind of a little beach community, a really nice beach community with old walled city and agriculture. And I remember the day we were scouting, I looked up, and almost in the distance, and then as it got closer, it was a man on a camel, a gorgeous man on a camel walking along the beach. Just walked, got closer and closer. I think I took a couple pictures with a camera back then, because my BlackBerry didn't have a camera. And by the way, everybody used my BlackBerry because it was the only phone that worked on the beach in Essaouira. All the British phones, nobody's phone worked. That little BlackBerry was what we all used to call. And my favorite BlackBerry. And guy on a camel. And we'd met with a representative of the king. We had Zach Alawi was our Moroccan producer. And the king gave us his blessing to use his army as extras. And we would make the armor and everything, but we could use his army. And I remember there was one of the areas there, they were growing, a farming consortium was growing watermelons. And kind of tough. Got a lot of watermelons here in a little farm. This is kind of what we need. We want to build the wall up here. So don't worry about the watermelon.
You're filming Thermopylae, right? This 300?
I know. This is Troy.
Troy, I'm sorry. This is the one with Brad Pitt. Okay, sorry.
He started with Brad Pitt. So King's guys said, we'll take care of the farmers. And they paid them for all their crop and asked them if they would dig it up, but they could replant when we were done. This is Morocco, to give us the right to film there. They were wildly film friendly and really good. And like I said, with Ben Affleck, we could pretty much have a complete Moroccan crew, with just department heads from England. So we shot in England. We built Troy, the city, in Malta, and did all the at-sea work on the boats and with the ships and landing and all that stuff in Malta. And we're going to do the battles and the beach approach and all the stuff up on the hill and the deadly fight between the Romans and the Trojans, and the Greeks and the Trojans in Essaouira. And as we've got the wall almost completed, the watermelon's been dug up, and we're building some costumes there and in London. George Bush started the countdown for the invasion of Kuwait. And my creative people got cold feet about being in an Islamic country, with me trying to explain that they're a kingdom and that they are over 2,000 miles from Kuwait on that other side of the world. And I don't see what that means. We can't film. And then it caught on with Talent and Wolfgang Peterson, and oh no, Steve, we can't film in an Islamic country. Everybody's going to not feel safe. And oh, Jesus.
Was that your toughest shoot, or would you say?
Yeah, it was my toughest shoot.
That was your toughest shoot.
Toughest shoot. And what are we going to do? Where do you find
everything you had?
12 miles of pristine beach with a beautiful cliff behind it, or hillside behind it. You're going to find it in a third world country. You're not going to find it. And one's going to be worse than the other. And by the way, wherever we're going to do it isn't going to have a stick of crew. And we have to bring extras. And anyway, we ended up in Cabo on the other side of the point. And as I said, not a stick of crew, a few Mexican crew. And we had to bring 200 Bulgarians to play soldiers, because there aren't a lot of people who live in Mexico and Cabo aren't working if you're Mexican. And certainly there are no other people. So we brought 200 Bulgarians from Bulgaria as the frontline soldiers, and put Mexican Mexican extras from Mexico City. So every extra, and we didn't use visual effects. We had hundreds of soldiers, had to be brought in, fed, housed. Cost a lot of money because of the attack on Kuwait. Cost that movie millions upon millions of dollars, and we did it on the west coast of Mexico instead of Morocco. So those are the kind of things that you got to scramble, and probably for the right reasons. If you have people who are uneasy, and you got to remember, if you're uneasy, you're asked to act, and yes, an actor or actress can act, but if they're not comfortable, it's a hard job for them.
You got to MacGyver it, because you can't anticipate geopolitical situations.
No,
that's something
really you can't. You don't know what's going to happen, and I'm not going to be the guy that's going to take the responsibility just in case someone didn't like a group of Brits and Americans filming in Morocco, and some maverick does something stupid. So I put it in a place where hopefully nobody would do anything stupid. So that was probably the toughest film I ever did. And I remember, bless his heart, Alan Horn asked me. He said, "Steve, you really were gone a lot. You paid a lot of attention to that movie. You can't do that. I need you to do 30 movies." And why? And I said, "Well, I should apologize, but it was a very hard movie, and it was movies like that is why I wanted to be in the movie business, and I felt just a want to be a part of it." I grew up with Helen of Troy and Demetrius and the Gladiator and the Robe and the Ten Commandments and all those sword and sandal movies, and those are the ones I watched as a kid and all. And so that's some business I want to be in. And I told Alan that, and he said, "Good, just don't do it again." So,
Derek, you got any questions you want to ask?
Yeah, I
Steve,
got a
in
couple.
closing?
I got a bunch of questions, but we don't have that much.
How much
time.
memory you got?
About 30 minutes.
Okay.
So
30 more minutes?
No, you don't have to stick.
No,
to 30
that's
minutes.
we have that much left because
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it was such an interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, this is first question is, what are your days like? What do you do on a daily basis? I'm curious about
Now?
That.
That's the hardest question anybody's going to ask me, and you can ask that to a lot of retired people, and they'll probably tell you, "I'm not sure." But retiring was important to me. I worked 49 and a half years in that industry, from 1968 to 2018. And I had wanted to retire a couple years early and got talked into, please don't. Give us a couple more years, and bless their hearts, and I love them all. And when I was that 2 years, they said, "How about 2 more?" I said, "Guys, no, I can't do 2 more. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to become kind of a grumpy old man. I didn't want to become the guy that said, 'Are you crazy? I did that 10 times and you can't do that. You can't do it.' I didn't want to be that guy. Everybody's got to figure it out. And I saw some of the older guys that did what I did turn into those guys. And I said, I'm not going to turn into those guys. I'm going to stay positive. I'm going to stay focused and collaborative. I'm never going to tell anybody, 'Are you crazy? You can't do that.' I'm going to tell them, 'I would like you to also think about this,' but I'm not going to be that guy." But I could feel myself when you got pressed going, "Oh man, I can't do this." It was time. I didn't want to work 50 years. So I retired. And it was a tough one because, I was used to being the guy. And I can tell you that my wife will probably maybe listen to this. I'm not sure. But at one day, it really got my attention when she finally said to me, after I barked out something, she said, "I don't work for you." And I had to kind of regroup.
Right.
Because, you can't do that job without being the decision guy. And you can't, at times when I said I wanted to be collaborative, well, that might have been with a director or producer, but others, it's like, this is what we're going to do, because you don't have time to negotiate every decision. So I was the decision guy.
Yeah, we know what that's like.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got it.
So I just had to, I didn't want to be that way with my wife. And she reminded me that I wasn't going to be that way with her. So that got my attention. I said, well, I got to keep myself busy. I do play golf.
Okay.
I don't play golf every day.
By the way, you say you play golf. I'm going to squeeze this in now. You play at historic Lakeside Country Club.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me really briefly about Eddie the Caddy Master?
I will.
Okay.
Lakeside is a storied golf club in Toluca Lake with a membership. We're going to have our 100th anniversary, and I've been a member for 31 years. My house is in Toluca Lake. My golf club is a mile away, and my work was 2 miles away.
Wow.
And
That's great.
even though Lakeside was appealing, I can honestly say I never did anything but maybe have lunch there. During all the years I was a member while I was working, I wasn't one of those guys that stole away to play golf because my job wouldn't allow that. So I've been a member for a long time, and we had a caddy master who I have a photo of, and I'll show it to you when we're done here.
I'll get it. I've
Yeah.
got it also, and I'll
Yeah.
give it to Derek, and he'll put it
Yeah.
up.
This is the golf course of the stars, pretty much.
Yeah, it was a
Bob-
golf course
Bob
of the
Hope was a
stars.
member,
It's
Bing Crosby.
touted
Yeah.
and has an odd name. It's Lakeside Golf Club of Hollywood, although it's in Toluca Lake. But it was just down the Cahuenga corridor from Hollywood. And Babe Hardy, Oliver Hardy was a member. W.C. Fields was a member. Humphrey Bogart. We still have in our bylaws, and they haven't changed it, a clause that studio security is not allowed on the property. And that was at a request of Humphrey Bogart because Jack Warner used to send security over to fetch him in the middle of a movie when he'd go over there and get caught up having a few extra cocktails after lunch and lose track of time. Former President Ronald Reagan was a member. Johnny Weissmuller is notorious for his lakeside antics.
Bing and Bob.
Bob Hope and Bing Crosby were Lakeside. The first clam bake was at Lakeside, and then Crosby took it up to Pebble Beach. And they were the heart and soul of Lakeside. And Crosby was a rascal. Hope was Bob Hope, and it was a lot of rascals back then. A bar was always 6 deep, and those were when guys smoked and drank, and they were guys.
Men's men.
Yeah, they were guys. They were just guys, and it's still to today standards is still a guys' club, and we've managed to maintain our men's locker room that includes a rather large bar and grill room that is members only, and members only are just guys. There are plenty of ladies, which is wonderful, and they have a great time, and I have a great time with them there and activities, but it's still a guys' club. And we have a ball there. So I steal away there. When I retired, I accepted a nomination to the board of directors. So throughout this heinous COVID period, I was on the board of directors. And part of your question is a tough one because retirement, I had no expectation of COVID and dealing with COVID. You have to remember, I retired in mid-18, and by 19, I'm locked in my house.
Right.
So, and that's when my wife reminded me that I didn't work for yeah, I mean, what do you do? And so now you're off and on. You have a little bit of freedom. Then they take it away from you. Then you can do this. Then you got to put a mask on. So it's been an odd retirement, and so that question is a tough one to answer. I did help steer our way through the COVID period as a board member of Lakeside, where we had to shut down the golf club. We had a tough decision where we had to punish a couple of guys who stole away onto the golf course to play a little golf when it was mandated that it get shut down, and the threat from the county office was, if you don't, we'll cut off your water. And we get a couple knuckleheads that decide that we can sneak out there and play a few holes. So it was a tough period. And it was a tough period for them too, because they lived close to the course and everybody was crazy and wanted to get outdoors as much as you could. So I was on the board, and I would guess certainly during the shutdown period and through my final year on the board, we probably had Zoom meetings 3 times a week, because something new came up and we'd have to get the board together and discuss it. What are we going to do with this one? And vaccinations. Are we going to require vaccinations? How do we lay off our staff? What are the rules for laying off the staff? How, do we let them all off? Do we offer them the benefits? And so, it's a very, Lakeside feels like a family. Laying off staff is like losing part of your family. And we voted to continue the benefits. The unknown was ahead. We don't know what's going to happen, but you can't take people's benefits away from them. You lay them off. There were all kinds of stimulus packages, but it didn't include health care. So we continued the benefits. And what I'm proudest of during that period of time is that we have a caddy program. And a caddy is an independent contractor. Caddies show up in the morning and wait in the caddy shack. And Eddie, who we can talk about real quickly, when Eddie was there, and he's no longer with us, but
He died at 102?
102. Worked at Lakeside for over 70 years.
Wow.
Over 70 years. Call the caddy.
Did he caddy for Babe Ruth?
Caddy for Babe Ruth. Eddie caddy.
Eddie caddy for Babe Ruth at Lakeside.
At Lakeside. So
Amazing.
the caddies, what do you do? They're not employees. They're independent contractors. And a group of our members sent out a all-member text, which is kind of frowned on, but not, to use the membership in your text and things. But sent out a full member email, saying that they were taking contributions to keep the caddies at least solvent during this period of time, and independently raised almost $200,000 from members, just from members, not from the club, just members.
Trying to do the right thing.
Throwing money into the pot for the caddies to keep them sound during this period of time. And so that's the kind of club it is. So you asked me about Eddie. Eddie has a little book. Do you have Eddie's book?
I don't think so.
I'll see if I can get it for you. You'd like to read it. It's a little bit of a biography. It's not real thick. And he does have a ton of anecdotes because, multiple presidents have played at Lakeside, and all forms of celebrities, and great stories about loops and all the ins and outs. And you can imagine all the characters that in most country clubs. But this one is special because it was such a Hollywood club. So Eddie's book has a lot of anecdotes. But Eddie, like a lot of people during the Depression, got on a boxcar and went from Chicago one winter, not working, young man, got on a boxcar to Los Angeles. I rode the rail and got off the boxcar, said, I don't know anything about L.A., but, I hear about Hollywood, so I'm going to go to Hollywood. So he goes to Hollywood, meets somebody who has a little tiny apartment, and he lets him flop on a sofa. and he heard that there's a golf club called Lakeside that's looking for caddies, a good place to possibly pick up a couple of cents. In those days, Eddie said it was probably 25 cents a loop. And if you got a half a buck, that was a big tip. So he goes to Lakeside, gets hired, and caddies at Lakeside. And he said, I was a young, strong kid. He's not big. He's our size. He's Frank's size. And said I'd do 2 loops. I got to regular clientele, and I'd probably make $1, 2 loops, and that paid the rent and got me started, and
Stayed there for the rest of his life.
stayed there for the rest of his life, worked his way up.
And you guys took care of him at the end?
We took care of him. The members took care of him. So Eddie, as you could guess, did have some Social Security, did have some Medicare, but when you get real old and you need full-time care and all those things, yet again, member came up with a nice note and said Eddie needs such and such, and it just became part of your regular dues. You just made sure Eddie was comfortable. And he lived to be 102.
Wow.
Pretty nice life too. I mean, he had, you know, he do what he loved, and he just did it.
I'll give you the last question.
I don't really have a question. I got
a question.
Okay.
And then you can ask your question.
Okay. Don't worry.
You ready?
Go ahead, my brother.
Okay.
Not worries.
I just want to get this out because it's a really important opinion from you. Why do and it's kind of difficult. Why do people watch movies?
Escape and entertainment.
And how do you make that choice as a person in your position?
That's pretty interesting. Look, my job was to allow them a product, make the movie feel as realistic and as beautiful. If it required beauty, to make sure it was the most beautiful. If it required reality, it was like, you're not going to pull the wool over an audience's eyes, such as a Troy. You've got to have real armor. Sure, you can put the rubber armor in the back, but in the front, you don't want somebody looking past and see a rubber flap or something. You want an audience to immerse themselves in that darkened theater. And that's why I so worry about the loss of movies, theaters, and screenings. And because I know I can watch stuff at home, but it's not the same. It's just not the same. And for the young people that have been cloistered at home, don't give up on movie theaters, because it's the real moment that you'll experience something you'll remember the rest of your life. The first time you saw this movie, what did it do? It changed your life, right? It could change your life. And so I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's why you make movies. You really give that audience a time to just forget about everything and immerse yourself in a story that maybe you've never heard before. Actors, I don't know how they do it. People who don't know how movies are made, but a beautiful actress has to look beautiful at 8 o'clock in the morning and has to look as beautiful at 7 o'clock at night, and she may be in the same scene. How do you do that? Especially if you're 35 or 40 years old. How did Julia Roberts look beautiful from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, right? Grinding on a scene that's maybe not going well. They get help. They get help from a makeup department, a hair department, a wardrobe department, They're pampered, and rightfully so. It's a tough job. It's a tough job. It's a tough job for guys, too. It's a hard job.
You know, when you talk about the love of film, and obviously the way you talk about it's eloquent. I'm not even going to touch that, but when you talked about that moment when you saw a guy in a camel coming towards you, I think about being in a dark theater, looking at Lawrence of Arabia and seeing Omar Sharif as that dot in the desert coming to, and it'll never leave me.
It was that moment. You're right. The comparison is right on the nose.
The dark theater, and to see that, and to see the sun, and to feel the heat, to feel it, you have to be in a theater.
The other element. My son went to Loyola Marymount, and he went to the School of Film and Television. They had a project about, one of the projects was the importance of music in film. And he had he's younger, so he had a few of the pictures that he liked, where the music meant something. And I said, come watch Lawrence of Arabia with me. And at that time, I still had the only copy of Lawrence of Arabia I had was a laser disc. Remember laser discs? They were the size of a 33. And for whatever reason, my laser disc was still hooked up, as was my DVD. But I didn't want to lose my laser disc because I had a shitload of laser discs. So watch Lawrence of Arabia with me. So the scene that you described, think about it. The music starts off as slow as that camel back there. Quiet, that theme that builds. And as he gets closer, the theme builds. And how did you feel when they start running and that music comes full bore and you get goosebumps? What made the goosebumps? Could be the music, because there's no dialogue at that moment. That music is the most important. I used to love being a fly on the wall because I have zero music talent, only appreciation. My wife won't even let me sing in the shower. But I used to love going to a scoring session with 150 pieces of an orchestra, a conductor, and the composer. Who composes music? That to me, that's a same as a jet pilot. Who's a composer? How does he compose a note for every one of those instruments, and how does it build into that score for the movie? And I'd go to the scoring session, just sit back and have a day of goosebumps.
Yeah, it's said that the day a film takes a quantum leap forward is the day they put the music in it.
Yep. That music is important to
Huge.
Any aspect of any film. And when you think about it, when you read a book, you don't hear music. You really don't. You read a book and you're engrossed in the story. So who thought about putting music in a movie? Why wasn't it just a movie and have actors and blow up shit? And who said, you know what, we should probably put some music in it? And I asked that question. I got the best answer from a professor. And he said, because it started with silent movies and all you had was music. Mm-hmm. And how could you ever make a movie without music? Yeah. And he said that is how music got to be part of the storytelling process, because he said that piano player, and in many of those movies, by the way, it was a live piano player in the theater. So when Jack and Harry Warner had their theater in New York City, they hired a piano player, and they hired a composer who looked at the movie and wrote a score for this movie, silent movie, and played the piano.
Howie Morris's mother was a piano player at a movie, so that's where he used to go to see the movies.
Perfect.
Because she was playing the score all along.
She was the piano player.
Yeah.
That played the score that a composer wrote for that specific silent movie,
Yep.
which is the only sound you heard was her piano and perhaps some subtitles. And even then, they didn't all have subtitles. They were acted by bigger than life actors that had to use their hands and evoke emotion,
Mhm.
but the music enhanced the emotion, and there we have music in movies. So
Well,
you
music
know,
and-
it's a cool business.
yeah,
It's a really cool.
it's a
business.
cool
It's a
business.
cool business.
And you do a lot of good for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
I think that escapism, that
Yeah.
moment. I always love it when I'll mention a movie and it's, I met my wife when I took her on a date and we fell in love in that movie. You know, and you go, wow, look at.
It's like that old Joel McRae movie where he goes on the road during a depression. And he thinks he just makes people laugh and he doesn't do any good. And
Yeah.
it's that,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you do a lot of good. You know,
Yeah.
escapism is,
Mhm.
Well, Steve, you've done a lot of good in your life, and we really appreciate you being here.
Well, I had a good life.
I love you.
I don't know about
Great.
did a lot.
I
Of
love
good.
you to death, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
you had a great life. And thanks very much.
Yeah,
Really,
it's
really
been
a pleasure to
it's-
meet you.
It is
really.
it is a wonderful life, and it continues to be a wonderful life.
That's it, Derek.
That's it.
Thank you, my
It's a wrap.
friend.
No more questions.
No more questions.
Next week's guest, two-time UCLA basketball champion, John Valley.
We'll see you next week.